Dialogue scenes are the bread and butter of realistic narrative filmmaking. We all have our favorite dialogue scenes. Often we're not thinking about how these scenes are made while we're watching them because our mind is on what the characters are saying to each other and how this conversation is affecting the story of the movie. That's a sign of how well made these scenes really are. They are transparent. And yet shooting these scenes yourself in a smooth and convincing style can be difficult if you haven't learned the rules. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. This discussion will have three main topics. Number 1, line of action. Number 2, shot composition. And number 3, putting the sequence together, pre-production and editing. First of all, we need to talk about the line of action and the 180-degree rule. This concept will help us figure out where to place our camera to best represent the scene. Let's take as an example the most basic dialogue scene possible, a dialogue between two people. If we imagine two people looking at each other while they talk, then let's also imagine an invisible string connecting them. Next, we'll imagine that line extending out beyond them to encompass the entire space they're in, and then we'll have what's called a line of action. We'll now use that line of action to structure the sequence of our scene. Once we have a line of action, we can then imagine an arc on one side of the line. The arc can only be on one side, and I'll explain why in a minute. It could technically be on either side of the line, not both, but generally it will be clear which side you'll want to use because one side will look better for composing shots and/or will have more space for the camera setup. Now that we have the arc, we can place our camera anywhere along the arc. There are two simple rules for doing this. First of all, once we decide which side we're using, we cannot cross the line to find a position to shoot. This will result in the characters abruptly shifting positions in the frame and is called breaking the 180-degree rule, as the line is sometimes also referred to as the 180-degree line. The second rule is that the camera must move a minimum of 30 degrees along the arc between each shot that will be cut in sequence with the one before it. In order for a cut to feel motivated, each shot must be composed sufficiently different from the one that preceded it. Now we know where we can place the camera, what exactly is it that we're shooting? So we come to our second topic, shot composition. Let's look at the different types of shots that make up a dialogue scene. This is a wide shot. It usually shows all the people in a scene and their surrounding environment. It conveys the maximum amount of information for the entire scene. We can see the entire bodies of our characters, and therefore their postures, poses, and gestures. Their physical disposition can sometimes tell us just as much or more about their character as seeing their faces in close-up or hearing their lines. This is a 50-50 shot. It's a type of wide shot. We learn less about the surrounding environment in this shot, but have a closer view of the relationship between the characters. There are other types of wide shots like establishing shots, which show a setting or location from an aerial perspective, so we get a grand sense of geography. Establishing shots tell us that this is where the movie is taking place. This is a medium shot. It shows just one character, and usually starts a little above the head and goes down to somewhere just above or below the waist. By getting closer to just one character, we are getting closer to understanding their state of mind better, and yet we can still see most of their body, which also gives us an idea of their physical positions and gestures. This is a medium close-up. While we can no longer see his entire physical presence here, we can see his face really well. Once the conversation becomes intense, this type of shot will be used often. This is another type of medium close-up called an over-the-shoulder shot. It shows us the face of the character talking, framed looking over the shoulder of the person listening. This type of shot keeps the attention on the person talking while reminding us of the interactive aspect of the conversation. And then there's the close-up. Despite its status as the most famous kind of shot, it should be only used rarely. The general rule is that it should be used during periods in the conversation that are intimate or intensely emotional. And that's it. There's nothing that will ruin the mood of your dialogue scene like an inappropriate close-up.
Have you guys seen my keys?
This brings us to the third and final topic, putting the sequence together, pre-production and editing. So let's talk about how to pre-visualize these shots in sequence, which will then dictate how you'll put them together in the editing software. The first shot in the scene is usually a wide shot, so we can get oriented with what and where things are happening and who our characters are. So let's place the camera here along our arc for our wide shot. As the scene continues, we generally push in closer to our subjects. The theory goes that the more the audience gets to know the character, the more permissible it becomes to use closer and closer shots. So we can put a camera here or here for our medium shots and close-ups, remembering that we need to keep at least 30 degrees between each camera position. Make sure to use your rule of thirds to keep your subject on the correct side of the frame so that they're looking across the shot at the person they're talking to. Remember to shoot across the correct shoulder when shooting your OTS shots so that you don't cross the line of action, because once again, the characters will swap positions in the frame between shots, creating a jump cut. So that's the theory. Let's take a look at some examples. This is from Skyfall, the interrogation scene between Raul Silva and James Bond. We start the scene with a wide shot. This shows us that Bond is tied to a chair, and it shows that he is stuck in this strange location with these different computers and wired together machines. We cut to a close-up of Bond, which shows us that he is perceptively taking the scene in. We then go back to the wide shot so we can see this trippy, antiquated elevator descending. Back to Bond's close-up. He is ready for whatever will come out of that elevator. Then we cut to a wide shot again.
Welcome. Do you like the island?
As Raul gets closer and closer to Bond, it turns into a medium shot and a medium close-up.
No, they only eat rat.
He tells a creepy story and ends up menacing over Bond.
The two survivors.
We cut back to a medium close-up of Bond and his stoic reply.
I made my own choices.
Now Raul sits. A series of over-the-shoulder shots draws us into the more interactive part of this conversation, and so on. You can see that the composition of each shot is purposefully chosen for its psychological effect on the viewer.
When all she does is lie to you.
She never lied to me.
No?
No.
What did you score on your marksmanship evaluation?
This is the classic farewell scene from Casablanca. It starts conventionally with a wide shot that sets the scene at the airfield.
Will you have your man go with Mr. Laszlo and take care of his luggage?
Certainly, Rick. Anything you say. Find Mr. Laszlo's luggage and put it on the plane.
Yes, sir. This way, please.
Quickly, the major plot point of the scene is revealed, as Rick announces that Ilsa will be getting on the plane, but that he will not.
And the names are Mr. and Mrs. Victor Laszlo.
This ratchets up the tension in the scene, as we in the audience are suddenly forced to accept that they must say goodbye. This extended 50-50 shot invites us to compare and contrast their fates in the film, and to contemplate their relationship to each other, that they are together for this moment, and yet soon to part, possibly forever.
Richard, no one. Now, you've got to listen to me. You have any idea what you'd have to look forward to if you stayed here? 9 chances out of 10, we'd both wind up at
This quick medium shot of Captain Renault provides a brief comic relief from the tension, at the same time as it reminds the audience of the high stakes of the situation. This swooping crane shot seems to serve the purpose of elevating the romantic tone of the scene as the implications set in. These over-the-shoulder shots serve to stitch Rick and Ilsa together, and thus heighten the paradox of the scene, which is that the most loving and brave thing Rick can do for Ilsa is to send her away.
Until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night.
When I said I would never leave you.
And you never will. But I've got a job to do, too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of.
And this is the stereotypical close-up of classical Hollywood cinema, which serves the dual purpose of getting the audience to savor Ilsa's torn emotions, and to simultaneously exalt the film medium's potency in its depiction of female beauty. So you can see now that although basic dialogue scenes seem very simple to the viewer, there's a lot going on behind the decisions about how they are constructed. Now that we've learned the rules, let's remember that rules are made to be broken. It's not that we'll get in trouble for breaking the rules, it's just that we'll upset the expectations of the audience. Sometimes that's what you want to do, and sometimes it isn't. So get out there and shoot some dialogue scenes. Remember, the road to artistic glory is paved with all the mistakes you have to make. The sooner you get started, the sooner you'll find yourself a capable and expressive artist in the cinematic art form. Or should I say,
A cinematic wizard.